Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting. It is April 25th, 2022, and the time now is 7:01. Let us open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Polliff?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallensack?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. Also present is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Michael Beasley, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Law Director Melissa Papora, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and that's it. Thank you. Council, first order of business tonight is the approval of the meeting minutes from April 11th, 2022. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
yes, I move to approve the minutes from the April 11th, 2022 regular council meeting as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Counselor, are there any objections? Hearing none, the meeting minutes for April 11th, 2022 have been approved. Also, council, since we had no committee of the whole meeting last week, we need to add items 89 through 91, 2022 to this week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to add items 89 through 91 to this week's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Hearing none, items 89 through 91, 2022 are added to this week's council agenda. Tonight, council, we have a special group that came to us about a year and a half ago or so. They're the Master Builders, or a STEM group from Oregon City Schools. And they talked to us about a project that they were working on and talked to us about possibly building a dog park in the city of Oregon. And I'm going to defer to Mr. Beasley for a minute. He's going to explain where we're at in this project at the very moment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think all of council and the mayor and administration also want to do a thank you to the students from the program who really kind of helped bring some energy to something we had been talking about. They started looking at it and presented a range of options. And I know you folks are the group that's been involved in the Lego robotics and that sort of thing. That's the right group I'm on, right? Is that, yeah, okay. I had a grandson who did that same thing, so he loved it. I just wanted to make sure I had the right group with you. When you came in, how long ago was it now? Was it almost 2 years? Yeah, right, right, almost right now, I guess. Yeah, right, almost 2 years ago right now. Time goes past. And we let you know that we loved your ideas and that we were working on some options. I like some of them better, like having it indoors. That would be better still. We couldn't quite pull that off financially. I think the council, we looked at the option. Let me just give a sense. And then when the group, one of the moms reached out to us after the story was in the Metro Press a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and just give some context of where we're looking. No, this isn't written in stone yet. We're going through a process. The Y is working as a partner with us. We've met with them a couple of times and they're excited about doing this. Just to give you context to where it is. This is the old, I know some of you talked about the Kmart site when you came with your proposals. This is the old Kmart site up along Navarre. This is the land that runs through it. This is the old WHO radio station site that your moms and dad remember better than you do. For people of me, that was my top 40 radio station when I was a kid. And then this is the YMCA property right here. So it's right along 280, immediately south of this flow. Right now, the city is rolling through, putting in, we're about to be announcing them soon, some restaurants up front and other developments been here. We're going to have single family residential here. We're going to have new apartment buildings here. And long term, we think there'll be additional housing down south on the other side of the Y. And one of the amenities that people in the real estate the community are telling us they love to see things like dog park within walking distance of new developments. And so the land that we're looking to partner with on is this parcel right here. Council President Tim Zale and Larry Schaefer have been kind of co-chairing a process that we're going through, is that we're trying to make some decisions on it. The rec department is going to get involved in it as we go, but this is the general shape of the site we're looking at. It's about, as you can see, it's gonna be like 2.3 acres or thereabouts. We already have parking infrastructure right here, where the recycling bins are now. If any of you use those bins, we would move those to a new location. This is, one of the models we looked at, it was a very nice dog park in Evanston, Illinois, a nice suburb just north of Chicago, where Northwestern University is. And theirs is about 2.1, 2.2 acres. We would divide it into two sections with kind of a small dog park right here for smaller dogs. And then the larger section for larger dogs. We're looking at a couple of options as we look at approaches. And listening to people from the community, people seem to be more comfortable with a membership-based system. So the people from Oregon who bring their dogs there then have confidence that the dogs have had their shots. The dogs aren't going to be getting roundworm or whatever, or less likely to in those settings. The dogs have had their shots, had their treatment, spayed and neutered, et cetera. And that they'll have like a key fob or a card that allows them to gain entrance when they want to come in. They'd have parking here and spillover parking here. We're going through a process with the Y and trying to figure out, is it better to buy this land or to lease it? And the Y is also interested in our long-term plans for things like pickleball courts right here, and other development that really brings some life and energy to the core of the community. It will be walkable, but most of Oregon will drive to it. But one of the things about Oregon, in the eastern part of the community, people have a lot of land, their dogs can run, there's a lot of farmland and places can go. In the western side of town, the neighborhoods are close on, and you have less land for your dogs to run. So people in these neighborhoods will be able to walk over to the site or just hop over in their car and drop off. And people in these new developments can walk over, and maybe there'll be some restaurants that they're interested in providing some opportunities for dog owners to come by, past and sit on their patio, et cetera. So that's what we're working on. And we will be starting it this year sometime. Council provided dollars in the budget for it. And we're going to be, ordering the fencing. We've got run water lines and things like that, but we're trying to make those final decisions on it. I don't know if Tim wants to talk through the elaborate gating system. You have about 4 gates just to make sure it's safe for the dogs to come in. When you first walk into a dog park with a dog, other dogs tend to want to run up and say, "Hey, what's going on?" If you have dogs, you've experienced that. So having a system where you walk into a secure area, gate gets closed behind, then you walk another gate, you still have some of that, "Hey, what's going on?" energy coming from the dogs, but it's a little safer for all involved as you go. So it's something that we're excited about doing. We think it's a real community asset that can, again, enhance quality of life here and help us to continue to grow to be the Oregon we're continue to be excited about. So, Tim?
You did mention it was membership.
Yeah, membership oriented is the shape
membership.
we're looking to do.
It's not good. It's not for basically making any money. It will help defray the cost of some of what we do there, but we thought it would be better if people that want to come there had a membership, because they'll be required to show that they have veterinary records. And we think that's important, that we know who's going to be there and who's not. And when they use their key fob or their card, it will identify who they are. But the gate system was kind of elaborate. One thing I didn't understand, you've got to go through several gates to get to the particular pen that you want to go to, small dog or large dog. And once I see how they did that, it makes it safer for everybody. So I think it's a great project. We've done a lot of work on the layout of it. Does anybody have any questions or comments about it?
We still like your idea better with a roof, but
Yeah.
the economics are what they are. Questions? Anybody want thoughts or suggestions?
We'd like to hear what you think.
Everybody's required to speak for at least 10 minutes. If not, I'll take that time. Mr. President, I would like to say one
Mr. Mayor.
thing. When you folks came in before and you bring this up, you didn't see real rush of action. But I can tell you by the standard that municipalities travel at, this is like lightning speed. Many of you are familiar with the Millard Avenue overpass, that was over 25 years in the making because of all the things that went up. The Navarre Avenue overpass was almost 20 years. 2 years is like I said, really lightning speed. And Mr. Beasley said, this isn't really cast in concrete, but we certainly have a sand cast of it. So we're close to a foundation for concrete. And I don't mean that in the word have actually put in concrete there, because of course it'll be grass. But another thing about having a membership to have your dog there, if people have something that they can lose, they're more likely to take care of it, right? And so as a city, having another city function, we have to maintain whatever we put in for life. And we've always found that it's a lot easier to create something than to uncreate it. Because once we get something started and say, well, doesn't work, and we try to get rid of it, it's not so easy, because there's some people that'll fight to keep it, other people say. So we like to try to do things right the first time and avoid all that. So really, as far as it is now, in 2 years, you guys can be proud of that.
Yeah,
All right.
go ahead. Come on.
Go ahead.
If you're more comfortable there, that's
Go ahead.
probably okay.
Just shout it out. So we can
Yeah.
hear.
So the Evanston dog park, did you use that for an example for the gate system as
Yeah.
well as the membership
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah, well, also the dog park in Toledo,
Yeah, there's a group, it's called Toledo Unleashed.
Toledo Unleash. They
It's
have
a
one off
non-
the trail there.
It's a nonprofit, and we're actually talking with them about, they might run it for us. It's a nonprofit group of people who care about dogs and pets and community, and they're actually in conversations with a number of communities. We might end up with, so your pass would work in other locations as well if you join us. So they're exploring that right now. We have had 2 meetings with them in the last couple of months. And we looked at the gate system at Toledo. We looked at the gate system at Evanston. They're both membership based. I've gone with one of my grand dogs to about 4 different dog parks just to get some sense of them. And we've enjoyed it. So I now have 3 grand dogs and a great grand dog, but our dog passed on. So.
I had no idea about the gate system when we first started this. I thought we just put a fence around one gate, right? And no, it's, these other parks have done this, it's tried and true, and it's actually for the safety of the dogs. So they don't get into it with each other, or escape or this or that. But it's quite a process. And there's more to this, believe me, than just some grass and a fence. By the time you bring water in, and we're gonna put a gravel path around the entire structure so people can walk outside around the whole structure. Eventually, I think we plan on putting some kind of pavilion in there that's
Something
for shade.
gazebo.
So we'll add things to it as it goes. But I think when we get the basic structure going, it's going to be very, very nice.
Fun with me. So thank you for the idea and the ideas and the energy. If you're doing.
If no one else has any questions, you can go unless you want to stick around for a council meeting.
All right, thank you for sharing.
Thanks for coming.
I want you to build a Lego model of it.
A Lego model.
We're boring. Okay, council, first item up for consideration this evening is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman, item 89, 2022, and I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to pay Spear Brothers for a raw water line repair. When I say raw water, we do provide raw lake water to the Oregon Clean Energy Power Plant. And earlier this year, in January, we discovered that the water line that was installed oh, probably a good 5 years now or longer, had a leak in it on Cedar Point Road, just east of Stadium. And so we knew we needed to make a repair. It does provide their cooling water, and OCE informed us that they had a planned shutdown in April. So we took advantage of that. We did go and get 2 quotes. Spear Brothers was the lowest. Underground Utilities was the other quote, and they were also doing work in the area. But we did that work first week of April. It went very well. And we do have a water supply contract with Oregon Clean Energy where they will reimburse us 100% for this repair. So, but it is contracted through the city. So we need this ordinance to pay Spear Brothers. So as much as they say it's an emergency work, we did have some time to plan it out. So for what it's worth. And they have agreed and they understand the price and they will pay this bill. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council?
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, 5 years doesn't seem like a long time for a water line to have a failure.
Yeah.
Is there something in a seam, in a joint?
Yeah.
That the
Yeah.
fasteners or the bolts?
Yep, Mr. President, Mr. Wallensack. Yeah, the leak was actually the pit between 2 long bores, and it was a special fitting. And it is typical that when you put the bedding back, that there's a shift or a movement, and that's what happened.
Okay.
So yeah, beyond the warranty, beyond, way of
Just in
covering
5
it.
years doesn't seem that long.
Yeah, no,
but-
and-
but
and-
I
and-
understand the reasoning
Right.
and how it happened. It just-
Right, right.
Thank you.
No, you're
Thank you,
right.
Mr. Wallensack. Thank you.
President?
Mr. Peasley?
Yeah, the administration very much feels the same way when we see those, but
Yeah.
it's the math.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will submit item 89, 2022 as ordinance 89, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, director of public service, and finance director to issue payment to Spear Brothers Incorporated, 3812 Old Railroad Road, Sandusky, Ohio, for providing labor, materials, and equipment due to emergency repair of existing 24-inch raw water line along Cedar Point Road and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 89 of 2022 as an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 89, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration is item 90, 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And once again, I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to enter into a contract with Greenman Peterson, Inc., or GPI, to perform construction inspection and construction administration for the Navarre and Coy Improvement Project. And just like all large either engineering contracts, once you're over 25,000, you have to seek qualification statements from engineering groups for inspection. And we did receive 3, and GPI we felt was the most qualified for this project. And GPI was also the inspector and construction administration for the Seaman Road Bridge project, which was also built by E.S. Wagner. So, but the scope of work and costs are included in Exhibit A, and they have done a good job for us in the past, and I'm sure they'll do a great job on our employees. So, and again, we have grant dollars that help pay this. A lot of the administration work is a lot of paperwork that's required by ODOT. Even though we're a local public agency, there's just a lot of detail to the paperwork, and you really do need a full-time inspector for this size of a project. So,
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Roman? Hearing none, I will submit item 90, 2022 as ordinance 90, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into an agreement with Greenman Peterson Incorporated, 4125 Highlander Parkway, Suite 50, Richfield, Ohio, to provide professional construction, administration, and inspection services for the LUC 2-22.51 Navarre Coy Intersection Improvement Project in an amount not to exceed $192,608 and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 90 of 2022 as an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second,
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, you take a roll vote of council, please.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Polloff?
yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 90, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration is item 91, 2022, also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And once again, I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to pay DGL Consulting for additional design work for the Navarre and Coy Improvement Project. The additional services and costs are included in Exhibit A, but 100% of this additional work was for right-of-way acquisitioning. A lot of it was laying out the different drive access for the BP gas station that's there, as well as the third base carryout and Premier Bank. And a lot of it just assisted the city in the right-of-way acquisitioning. So there's additional work that was required, but it did help, that's for sure, in acquiring the right-of-way. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Regarding BP on this project, they're going to basically have to shut down. Are they have to move
Yeah.
tanks? Are they have to move fuel tanks for this?
No, the tanks will stay in place, but another gas station outfit bought the property and is planning to rebuild, but they'll build like a store on the north side of it.
Behind.
We're going to enclose the creek,
Right.
but
Right.
they're going to put their store on the north side, but they'll leave the island and the tanks in place.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
they'll,
Roman.
and they'll do it during our project as well, just after.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions for Mr. Roman? Hearing none, I will assign item 9122 as ordinance 91, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to sign amendment number 2 with DGL Consulting Engineers LLC, 3455 Briarfield Boulevard, Suite E, Maumee, Ohio, for additional professional engineering services for the LUC SR-22 or -2-22.51 Navarre Avenue and Coy Road intersection improvements, PID 109596, in an amount not to exceed $18,241 and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 91 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second,
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you read 91, 2022 into the record, please?
Oh, I did.
Oh, you
Okay,
just,
so, yeah.
sorry. Could you take a vote, please, of
Okay.
council?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Polloff?
yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzeck?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 91, 2022 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Council, this completes our council business for the evening, so we'll now move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, and council, you got the correspondence for appointments and a resignation. I'm going to start with that of the resignation of Grant S. Rosbert, who you concurred with the appointment to as police officer. Prior to his startup date, he chose to pursue another career opportunity. And so I would ask council's concurrence in accepting the resignation of Grant Rosbert as police officer effective April 13th, 2022.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move to concur with the mayor's acceptance of the resignation of Grant Rosberg from the police department.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Second, by Mr.
Yes,
Wallenzeck.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor, council does concur with accepting the resignation of Grant S. Rosbert.
Okay, thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. President. And next, we have some seasonal appointments to make, and these will be for utility worker 1, classification 3. I will list all of them, and their startup date would be May 2nd, 2022. And the first is Kennedy Coughlin, 553 Grasser Street, Step 1, 1525, which they're all Step 1, 1525. Connor Beatty, 23109 West Stone Ridge Trail. Mason Morse, 524 Georgetown. Thomas Juarez, 3504 Lynbrook Lane. Once again, they're all startup date May 2nd, Step 1, 1525 an hour. And I would ask council's concurrence in the appointment of these individuals.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I'd like to concur with the mayor of the hiring of Kenny Coughlin, Connor Beatty, Mason Morris, Thomas Ureras, effective date May 2nd, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Polliff. Thank you, Ms. Polliff. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor, council does concur with the hiring of the 4 individuals from the street division, for the street division.
Okay. Thank you, council. And lastly, to the position of engineering intern, you have concurred with the appointment of Mr. Vincent Sabo prior to today, but and the startup date was, I think, a week.
It's May 16th.
All right, well, it was May 16th that you approved or you concurred with, and he did complete his
He had a survey
Certi-
class.
yes, and he did complete it sooner than expected, so he is available earlier than the startup date. So the new effective date for Mr. Vincent Sabo as engineering intern would be May 16th, 2022. So I'd ask council's concurrence in moving
Engineer.
forward
It's
the
engineer.
startup date to Vincent Sabo to May 16th. Wait,
Just, he is an engineer one,
Not
an
engineer
engineer,
Not
All right.
intern.
full-time engineer.
full-time engineer. Sorry. And I even brought my glasses today and I
Yeah.
still screwed that up. All right, so engineer, as Mr. Roman said, is at range 22, step 3, 3330 in hours, annual rate 69,261.40. And once again, Vincent Sabo, effective date, May 16th.
May 9th.
May 9th.
Oh, yeah, May 9th.
May 9th.
Well, I'm
It's
really,
all-
I'm really on.
You're fine.
So May 9th. So I'd ask council's concurrence in the advancing the appointment to May 9th for Vincent Sable.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I will concur with the mayor of Mr. Vincent Sabo, his new effective date of May 9, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Polliff. Thank you, Ms. Polliff. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mr. Mayor, council has concurred with the revision or the revised date of May 9th, 2022 for Mr. Vincent Sabo.
Thank you, council. With that, I would conclude my report.
Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members, just a couple of notes. I did, as Mr. Roman and his team are continuing to work to wrap up construction on our roadway connecting up from Pickle up toward Town Center. The Department folks did reach back out to us last week, and we're going to be getting that platted, and they're looking forward to beginning construction in that area. As we look at those, we can still continue to work with our partners on the kind of the more commercial side, and we're excited about what's going on there. We, again, had a plan commission meeting, dealt with one of them, and the other one, we're still wrapping up our due diligence process. It's going very well. We had a very good session last week on it, so we're feeling good. Another note, just as something that as the city and the council work together on things like dog parks and town centers, it really was underscored today. We had a lengthy session on workforce and long-time workforce challenges, and the fact that we have a shortage of young people in this country. Our birth rate is way below the replacement rate. So that if you look at why people are having a hard time filling vacancies, there's some real interesting data, and I'll put together a little packet and I'll share it with the council members. It's kind of fascinating data points that during COVID, people started changing their behaviors a little bit. There was more individual business startups than any time in the country's history. More people were choosing to be their own boss instead of going to work for a company. Fewer teens working, more seniors retiring, more young parents staying home with with little children because they don't feel like working, or the economics don't work because of the cost of childcare. And we've got a number of years as the baby boomers leave the system where we're going to have more retirements than there are people to fill those slots across the board. And as Oregon is working to attract industry, as the city as an employer has to have a workforce, we got to factor in how are we going to do those things. But one of the real drivers is that you got to have people want to move to an area and live there. So this region and Oregon, obviously we have to look at this region, have to be as attractive as we can to a market that is different than it was when people were competing for jobs. Now we're competing for workforce. And that's a different space for all of us. And it's something that'll change, but I'll share the kind of the PowerPoint. I'll send it out to you. The thing we went through today was kind of fun.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley.
Thanks.
Ms. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake.
I don't have a report. I just got a question. I know when we had the resolution for National Wetland Days back a couple months, we talked about getting trash trappers for the creeks and stuff like that. I know I seen on the news, I know it was in parts of Toledo and the county, they had a bunch of these trash trappers. I was just curious if there's been any headway on it, or
Mr. President, Mr. Drake, I know Toledo received grants for that work. I don't think that was straight out of their budget. I think for us to do it, we'd either have to do the same, apply for grants, or, and if short of a grant, you'd put it in the budget for next year. That's what you do, so. But we could look at it.
okay, thanks. That's
Yep,
it.
yep.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenczak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Davish.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Pauloff.
No report, Mr.
Thank
President.
you, Ms. Pauloff. Mr. Horniak.
No official report, Mr. President. However, I would remind members of council that the Oregon Economic Development Foundation is having their first meeting of the year. So it's the first in a while. Coming up on this Friday morning, I will have to get back to everybody maybe through Ms. Evans as far as time and location. Unfortunately, I grabbed the wrong phone and the wrong calendar with me today. So we'll update on that, but they'll be announcing the new director that they've hired in, as well as kind of the kickoff meeting for the year. So just wanted to bring that up to everybody's attention. That's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And council, I don't have anything directly from my committee, but we do have to set a public hearing for 7 p.m. on Monday, May 23rd, 2022. And this application is SUE 175-22 for a special use in an R2 medium density residential district for the purpose of having up to 6 chickens, hens only, on the property described as parcel number 44-23687. The applicant's owners are Christopher Antu and Nicole Vandegeller, and the location is 3026 Pickle. Council, could I get a motion to add this to a public hearing?
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish, go ahead.
I'd like to hold the public hearing as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, we will hold a public hearing on the 7th, Monday, May 23rd, 2022.
Mr. President,
Go ahead,
I just-
Mr. Mayor.
I would just like to speak to one thing on that SUE condition. When you guys look at it, there was a couple that lived next door to the applicant that was present, and they had some concerns. So the condition, if you'll see, is something that limits where the chickens could go. Actually, Tina was
anything-
here, and she was able to draft that box.
It was
And
anything other than that, right?
yes, where the blue box, the blue square is where the chickens are not permitted to go. So the people that were having a little bit of a problem with it seemed to be okay with that, and so was the applicant. So they did, I don't think everybody was ecstatically happy, but they seemed to be okay. Everybody seemed to be okay with that compromise. So just so that you know what that blue box means, that is where the chickens would not be permitted to go on her property.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, since we have nobody signed in, any people or delegations signed in to speak this evening, I will seek a motion for adjournment.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves. Is that
so
Mr.
moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, council is adjourned.
Brilliant thing this council's ever done.
Melissa,
Really.
you have one minute.